Hi, I'm John Schmidt, retired teaching elder and chair of the Administration Committee for Baltimore Presbytery. I'm going to give you an orientation to the budget of the Presbytery today, and I don't have much time to do it, so let's just jump right in. We've got to face it, the Presbytery budget is complicated. First of all, there's two versions of it. There's a condensed version that we use for passing the budget and for general oversight. And then there is the full budget that has all kinds of additional columns in it that shows which income stream, which income source funds each ministry. And that's the one that's used to actually track the budget day to day. But the fact that the income streams are so important gives us the first clue to understanding the Presbytery budget. So we're going to look at this issue of income streams. The first thing we need to recognize is that the income for Baltimore Presbytery comes from many sources. The first income source is per capita. This is the most basic part of the budget. It's the most Presbyterian part of the budget. Every PCUSA church has per capita dues. Per capita is a big part of the budget as well, about 32% if everybody paid their per capita. And these funds come 100% from the churches. And, it's as close to a required contribution as we get in the PCUSA. And all of these funds in Baltimore Presbytery are used primarily on responsibilities that are mandated by the Book of Order. In other words, the closest thing to mandated contribution also goes to the things that we must do as a presbytery. And so that means it supports the work of COM, CPM. It is the source from which we get our contributions to GA and Synod. And it's what funds the staff support of the General Presbyter and Stated Clerk. In Baltimore Presbytery, we also use it for the cabinet expenses and for the office facilities. I think it's smart to have these core functions of the presbytery funded from the per capita dues, which are our core income stream as Presbyterian churches. The next income stream is shared ministry. This is a vision-driven part of the budget. This is funding what we want to do in the world. It's kind of like the presbytery's mission budget, and it's about 12% of the budget. So it comes 100% from the churches. It's vision-driven. It's used primarily to impact the world, and ministry groups use it for area projects. Thriving Congregations uses it for new worshiping communities. Spiritual leader development uses it for all kinds of things, including scholarship. And Reconciliation uses this money to fund our partnerships. The next part of the budget is the trustee endowment, and this requires a bit more explanation. We have a huge endowment in this presbytery. It's currently about $16 million, but this value fluctuates. Generally, we don't spend the capital of the trustee endowment. In other words, what we use is a percentage of the average value of the endowment across the past 3 years. Now, even though we have $16 million down in the endowment right now, the average value of it for the past 3 years is $13 million. And so that's what we would use in generating the income that's put into the presbytery for 2022. And this amounts to about 42% of the budget. We give 4.5% of the endowment based upon a 3-year average to the budget of the presbytery. It's used primarily to support our churches in pursuing health and ministry. In other words, it's for staff support. It gives money for program staff, for center staff and for the administrative staff. The next part of the budget is reserve funds. And this is savings from unspent budgeted funds. In other words, every year we set a budget, and if, for example, part of the budget is to fund a new position and it takes 3 months to fill that position, well, that money is not spent. And rather than trying to return money to its original source, we put it into savings for a rainy day. It's primarily used to support one-time events, big dreams, and experiments. And we protect it according to its original intended purpose. So there's a per capita reserve fund, trustees, staff, and other. We've got shared ministry reserve fund, racial justice, and a special one for ministry groups that comes in part from shared ministry. Finally, we have another income stream. These are generally small. We have several of them, and these are monies that are given or set aside for specific uses. It's used primarily by committees and commissions. There is one that's fairly sizable, and that's the Lakeland Fund, which is used for new worshiping communities and church revitalization. Let's take a look now at our expenses. These are detailed in the budget. I want to just point out some major categories that are important. In our expense streams, the first major division is program expenses, and that's about 38% of the budget. That's for the work of our commissions, our committees, our churches. This is the bulk of the work that we do together as a presbytery. The other part of the budget, 62%, is for the staff support that we receive to get this work done. Now I'd like to use the 2022 draft budget to show some specifics. It's small on the screen, so you might be able to use your copy and drop box at another time. The first part of what we see in the budget is what I've pointed out as our different income streams. The main line we're going to be looking at is, the main column is column AK, which is the 2022 budget. There's a $1,341,915 budget. Now this is a $212,000 increase over the budget for 2021. Now, some of this is cost of living and increase in program budget, but there's something special in this budget for 2021 that gives you a little bit of idea of how we use some of our reserve funds. If you'll notice in line 20, there's the interim pastor program. I'm not going to give you many details about that, but it's listed as a $105,000 commitment. This will come from the trustee staff and other reserve. We will be using this because it's experimental. It's listed as $105,000, but ideally, if we open up this position, it would actually be supported by the churches using this interim for their church, whether it's two smaller churches using them the same interim half-time, or whether it's a church that has a larger budget that employs the interim. The actual cost to the presbytery could be $0, or it could be 50% of this $105,000. It's a floating number, and dollar for dollar, it'll be paid out of savings, out of a reserve, and it will not impact the program budget of the rest of the presbytery. This is the reserve section of the budget, and you'll notice that each line protects the reserve funds for uses that reflect the original reason why the money was given. Now in line 25, you see a shortfall number of $42,000. That is because in order to make this budget balance, we had to pull money out of reserves because our normal income streams are not large enough for the intended ministry. And that's particularly true for per capita in 2022. Per capita will not keep up with the mandatory activities that we do as a presbytery. And in order to make up that shortfall, we're actually going to be pulling money out of the trustees' staff reserve. And that is something we only want to do for a year. The point of outlining that to you is for you to see how the income streams help us to evaluate what we're doing as a presbytery and to hold ourselves accountable. Now we get down to the expense portion of the budget, and it's divided up according to our committees and commissions and the various works that we do. We go on to the next page of the budget, and there's more of our expenses indicated here. There are some notes in the 2022 comments that indicate why different figures have changed. And then we now get to the biggest part of our budget, which is the presbytery staff expense, and you see how it's outlined here. We have a subtotal at the bottom on line 89, and then we have the final recap that happens at the bottom of the page that gives us an idea of how much we're spending and how much income we have. And again, I'm reminding you that we do have sufficient income to cover this budget, but to do so, we're using savings from the past. And we feel like the way we've decided to do that, it has integrity, as long as we don't try to do that every year for the particular kinds of shortfalls we have in the 2022 budget. Then on the final page, page 3, we have a really helpful summary that summarizes the two major divisions, programming and salary, and then it gives you an idea how much money comes from each income stream and goes to these expenses. So that gives you an overall picture of the budget, an overview of how to read it and understand it as cabinet members.